Welcome to How Did You Do That, the podcast where guests share the behind the scenes of their successful B2B content marketing campaigns. The path to success is rarely as smooth or straightforward as we think, and we want to hear all about it. So, this podcast is hosted by Isoline Communications, your local friendly tech B2B content marketing agency. I'm Claire Trevian, an account director at Isoline, and I am joined today by.
I'm Dita Demeter. It's great to be back on the podcast after a bit of a brief hiatus where I ceded my place to some other people from Isoline. So I'm account manager at the agency, and I'm really excited for a special guest today.
Which leads us to that our special guest today is Stephanie Brown, who is from Pointe Marketing, a marketing communications and business development agency, which she founded over 15 years ago. And Steph really focuses on helping creative agencies thrive, with a particular focus on award strategy and entries. And she has helped us a lot with that also. So welcome, Steph.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you with us.
May I just say, I don't only work with agencies. I do a lot of work direct with brands as well.
Thank you for clarifying that. So, on that note, could you maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get into this particular strand?
Yeah, it is a very specialist subject area, I have to say, and people are always strangely fascinated. Like when it's a great door opener to conversations with people, even people who are not in marketing. And I actually got my start. So I got my start working in agencies, or even before that, I was a professional dancer. And when that sort of came to an end, I fell into marketing as a marketing assistant in a branding agency. And it was there that I kind of discovered a knack for writing. And they entered a lot of awards, and I sort of held my hand up and said, "Oh, I think I could do this," and they said, "Okay, well, along with all the other stuff that you're doing, write our entries." And it seemed that I was able to write and win a lot of entries for them. And I mean, obviously, that was at the very beginning of my career, and I sort of moved on to various different agencies, eventually working my way up to becoming a European business development and marketing director for a global branding agency. But I was always doing the awards as part of my job. Then I went to another company and was very sadly made redundant in 2008 because of the recession. Um, and so that kind of gave me ideas. Well, what could I do? I could, take some time out and do an adult gap year. I could try to look for another job, but it was the recession and I was a very expensive non-billable overhead for an agency. So that probably wouldn't work, or I could go it alone. And I decided to go it alone. And I kind of, at that stage, my business was sort of two strands. I did marketing consultancy for agencies, and I also did the award stuff. But the plan was always over time that I would move more into, or I would just focus exclusively on awards. And about 3 years ago, that's exactly what happened. And so now I focus exclusively on awards consultancy.
I think our first question, and again, I hinted at this a little bit before we started recording, but I'm fascinated by your experience as a dancer. So I really just wanted to ask if you thought that your experience as a dancer and your, I guess, career as a dancer helped you at all in your later career as a marketer.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. And before we started this recording, I also mentioned that, strangely enough, over the years, I have met many, many former dancers who've gone into marketing or content creation or something like that. Um, and I think, upon reflection, I guess, I think that the main thing probably is you learn discipline as a dancer. So the discipline that you learn as a dancer it can be applied to anything, but maybe I gravitated towards the creative industries because maybe I thought, well, for sure, I knew that it would be soul destroying to sort of work in a bank or a law firm or something like that. Um, and so I gravitated to the creative industries for that reason, but definitely I think that having a dance background puts you in good stead in terms of being able to apply yourself to anything and learn anything and be disciplined enough to focus on it.
I think also with dancing is a really good attitude to feedback that I feel that maybe those who don't have that sort of artistic background maybe don't have as much. And I've sometimes mentioned this to people, and people don't get it. So I was sort of saying, well, when I used to go to a performing arts school, and if I wasn't getting any feedback or criticism from my dance teacher, I thought I was the worst of the worst, beyond any kind of hope, and I might as well just stop. Whereas if you did, it was like, "Ah, worth improving. Then in that case,
Definitely, and especially I think like I did my dancing or, my in my youth, in my teens and early 20s when I was at my peak, was kind of in the 80s and early 90s, which was a very different time in the dance world to what it is today. So you become quite thick-skinned, and I am definitely quite thick-skinned. I don't, things wash over me, and I'm just like, in terms of feedback and things like that, I don't take things personally.
I think that's such a key thing. I also have a little bit of experience as an actor, mostly in kind of amateur drama scenes and stuff like that. So nothing professional, obviously, like yourself. But I do think it gives you that ability to kind of separate yourself from your art and just say, well, there's two things really. Obviously, you are not what you create. You are not the art that you create, and it's easier to make that distinction when you're an actor, when you're a dancer, or when you're a performer, anything like that.
very true, very true. All right, so should we dig deep a bit more into awards? Much as I would love to carry on talking about dancing and acting because it's so fascinating, I think, to all of us. But awards are very, very cool as well. So let's maybe start with why should any enterprise or agency enter an awards? What are the pros and the cons for them?
Okay. So I guess ultimately it depends on the business's objectives. I generally say that you can group awards into three overarching buckets. Bucket number one would be for recruitment retention side of things. So raising your profile in order to attract great people, winning awards in order to attract great people, or equally, entering and winning awards to keep your team feeling good about what they're doing, and how they're feeling about what they're doing. So that's kind of bucket. These are in no particular order, by the way. That's bucket number one. Um, Bucket number two, it's a less frequently used bucket, but very important, I think, is if it's a small to medium sized business and the owner founders are looking to sell or attract investment, business awards can be a very good way. Two things. They can be a very good way to attract investment or to prove that you are a well-run business, but also they're kind of a weird cut through to getting all of that content that allows you to prove that case when you're talking to potential event investors. There's a third bucket. The third bucket is has to do with business development and marketing. So, I mean, obviously, it depends on your business and what you do. For example, if you are a financial services company, you might want to be winning awards having to do with technology related to new products and services that you offer to your various audiences. Those are more to do with your products and services rather than your overall business.
Within those three buckets and kind of even beyond that, I mean, I think the hardest thing about awards is kind of choosing them and understanding what the right kinds of awards really are. Because obviously, when you start Googling, B2B tech awards or whatever it might be, there's billions and billions that you can choose from. But how do you pick the quote unquote right ones? How do you pick which ones are worth going for and which ones are a bit of a scam, maybe?
Yeah, really good question. So, the most scammy awards are the ones that they send you an email saying, "Congratulations, you're already a finalist," or something like that, and you've not done anything. Those are the most scammy ones because basically what they are trying to do is just get you to pay for it's kind of like a cheap scammy ploy to get you to buy advertising or advertorial content. Usually they come from a magazine. The best awards to look at, I would say, or the ones that are sort of most reputable, the ones that are most reputable generally will come from recognized industry bodies. So apologies that I don't know enough about the B2B tech industry bodies, but let's say hypothetically there is in the UK an industry body called, the Technology Industry Association. Most industry bodies will run some kind of award scheme, and generally because those industry bodies are have charitable organized are either registered charities or they invest their money back into the association. They're not in it to make money, really. Those tend to have a very good reputation, and they're also within your own industry. Therefore, you're comparing yourself with your peers. It's apples to apples as opposed to apples to oranges. And then also a lot of industry body trade magazines and publishers will have awards associated with them. And generally those tend to have a relatively good reputation as well. So red flags.
Here we go.
I've got a list here, so apologize that I'm kind of looking down. For me, one of the red flags is if there's no information on the judging criteria or the relative weighting of each criteria. So how are you supposed to enter something if you don't even know how it's going to be judged? Or the judging criteria is very woolly. A very good example of that today, in fact, I was looking at an advertising industry magazine whose name shall remain nameless, who have maybe not so much of an award, but it's more like a league table. So it's like, the top 50 people, blah, 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 or whatever. And, you nominate someone or you can nominate yourself. And the judging criteria for that, it's the editorial team that select the people who ultimately make the list. And what they say is that they will select people who send in nominations, but also within the wider industry. So they're not only selecting from people who send in the nominations, and the nominations are free. So it's not like you're paying to nominate. So that's a good thing. However, for me, that's a red flag because what that says is they will exercise bias for sure, and they will be more predisposed to people that they know already editorially or like from an editorial perspective, or people who invest in advertising or sponsorship. We are all humans, and we all, whether we like it or not, we will exercise bias on things. Another red flag is when you need a degree to decipher a 100 plus page call for entry document. Like, really, it shouldn't be that difficult, An example of that one is more, I would say, what I would call like some of the top tier creative awards that are out there. So less about business impact and effectiveness and more about, sort of advertising effectiveness or marketing, creativity, purely judged on creativity. And those ones, they have like literally hundreds of categories. And there are some that have 2 or 3 entry documents. And each of those entry documents is like 50 to 100 pages each. For me, that's a bit of a red flag. If it's that complicated and it's going to take you that long to figure out, like you're just, better off spending your time on other things. Linked to what I just said, if there's more than 50 categories or so, with many overlapping and similar to each other, for me, that's a bit of a red flag as well.
Why would they do that? Yeah.
Because they're trying to get you to enter more than one category so that they can make more money.
And did they just, I don't know, AI generate these categories? Or how do they come up with such similar ones?
No, and to be fair, I mean, and these are not hard and fast rules. I mean, there are some awards, out there that I've helped Isoline with that do have more than 50 categories, but they sort of divide them into
sector
entries for big companies, entries for small companies, or sector, but they don't overlap. None of the categories overlap. So it kind of works. There are some awards that kind of make you pay before you actually go through the entry process, red flag.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be very cheeky.
Red flag. Some of them will actually make you pay before they even send you the what's required for the
Yeah.
entry
Just
information.
run immediately.
I mean, run immediately. That is like, they're just in it for the money. Some awards actually make judges pay for the privilege to be a judge. Red
Oh my
flag.
goodness. Yeah, yeah,
Red
yeah,
flag.
yeah.
I mean,
That's shocking.
Uh, and by the way, actually, I will say that a great way to learn about awards is to try to put your people up to forward to be judges, but not for the awards that make you pay for the
We do
privilege.
that every year. There's, I can't remember which marketing award it is, but we get to have a couple of the categories and we can review the entries and sort of support with that. And it's a nice way to learn how other people are doing entries and so forth. Have you ever yourself been a judge then to sort of be on the other side? Yeah.
I have judged a couple of awards as well, and it is super interesting, and I think it really helps you to understand exactly that what goes into making a winning entry. I can go on and wax lyrical about it, but if you're in a room with judges and they're talking about why something was a good entry or not, it will probably stick more than me.
Very inspiring anyway.
Another red flag. Oh my God, there's so many red flags. They make you pay for winners packages. So basically, so you enter and you have to pay the entry fees. Then, if you win, you can only say that you've won if you pay extortionate winners fee packages. And when I say extortionate, I mean like thousands of euros. And often they're very sneaky. Like I know quite a few. I've spoken to quite a few companies who've been burnt by this because they're very sneaky and it's all very small print, sort of, in the terms and conditions, if you win, you will need to pay a winner's package. So like if they don't spot that and they enter, they've wasted all of their, and then suddenly they're hit with like, a 2 to 5,000 euro winners package fee and they don't have the money for that and they bow out, then they've wasted their entry fees and all that time as well in creating the entries. So that's a big red flag. Another red flag is awards that make all of the shortlisted companies attend the winners ceremony and or an affiliated conference. So what I mean by that is they make you can only win if you pay to go to their conference and pay for a table of XX people to attend the event. Again, money spinning exercise. You shouldn't be forced to go. Obviously, if you are a finalist and you have a chance of winning, yes, it would be great to attend, but that should be your choice, not theirs. Another red flag is that there's very long short lists in each category, but they only hand out one winner per category and sometimes none. Again, that's to get bums on seats at the ceremonies.
So there's a bit of a theme here, which is if you're spending money without necessarily having to, and they're just making you, then you might not want to consider this award. I think we've spent quite a bit of time on the negatives. So I'm wondering if we should move on to, kind of what makes a good award entry. So I would love to understand more about what you think the ingredients are to a winning award entry.
Really, the number one thing is that you need to stand back. It's very hard. This is a very hard thing to do because when you are within a company, you are understandably proud of everything that you do and about everything about your company. If you feel that you want to be entering an award, then, there's a sense of pride there. So you really need to somehow step away from that pride and have a very impartial view on results versus objectives, basically, combined with what is your story. So for the sake of argument, let's say that we're talking about business awards. So best IT business in the world awards. You want to make sure that obviously that your business has made some great strides within the last year to 18 months or whatever usually the awards have some sort of date parameter associated with them. So you want to be able to sort of do that. But equally, it's not just about sort of, you've had great turnover and profits and all of those sorts of things. It's also about what were the things that made that happen and why and how do you make that into an interesting story, Were you maybe you were a startup agency, you started up as, somebody in their garage making, sort of creating some sort of new IT program and sold it to some big IT company. It could be, weaving that sort of a human story. So you want to create a human story about your business or brand. And you want to make sure that, it's a very well-rounded story. So it's, as I said, it's not just about meeting targets. It's about what are you doing? What are you doing in terms of bringing your people along for the ride? What are you doing to build and grow the culture so that everybody is a part of what's happening? And how can you prove that that's the case? Maybe you have hard objectives related to that as well. Maybe one of your challenges might have been your business was a revolving door in terms of people. You decided to really work out what made you different and special as a business and make sure that everything that you said and did delivered on that. And actually that ended up resulting in retaining your people for many years after that. So for me, that's the main thing is to sort of state what your objectives were, make sure that your results relate back to your objectives, make sure that they're hard objectives and that they're hard results. I mean, you can have softer things as well, and make sure that there's context around that as well. And the other thing is what makes a great entry is having real data as opposed to percentiles. I know that that can be tricky with many companies because they don't want to release what is potentially confidential information. The thing about many awards these days is that judges sign NDAs. Most awards will only, like if you are a finalist or you win, they will ask you for an executive summary, and that's the only thing that they will publish if you win. So you can make sure that that's watered down and in percentiles and that doesn't include any compromising information. But they really do want to see real figures. And the reason I say that is because real figures give them context. If you kind of say something like turnover grew by 1,000%. Forgive me because I'm doing this on the fly, so my maths might not be correct. But there's a very big difference between if all you say, so if you say that your objective was to increase turnover, and then you say that your result was we increased turnover by 1,000%. Isn't that amazing? Well, there's a really big difference between going from 100 to 10,000 or going from 1 million to 100 million.
Yeah. Well, one of them is great for a small company, obviously, but for a massive company, you're like, what? No, that's not so.
Well, exactly, but there's no context. So if you only have the plus 1,000%, you have no idea. The other thing is, what if your entire industry grew by 1,000%? Well, then judges might think, okay, well, it's not what you did as a business. You could have done nothing because the overall category grew by 1,000%. So you could have done nothing and you probably would have grown by 1,000% because everybody else did.
I seem to recall as well with some of the ones that we entered with you that we were able to mark things as confidential as well. So I think that was quite helpful.
Absolutely. So that's the other thing. So you can either mark things. And very often, so there's that executive summary that you can water down, but then many awards will allow you to provide, if they're going to publish, some awards want to publish the entire story as a learning for everybody in the industry or whatever. In that case, what they normally do is they allow you to provide a confidential for judges version only and for publication version. Now, of course, you can't suddenly remove all of the results from the for publication version, but you can water them down. You can remove some of them that you feel are too confidential, et cetera, et cetera. Within all of that, within the hard results versus hard objectives and providing a context, you weave that interesting story that makes judges want to read. So for me, I guess if I could sum it up, a great award entry would be something that is both equally weighted in terms of right brain and left brain, creative and analytical at the same time.
Perfect. I'm just wondering, when you first started writing awards, what did you find the most challenging, really? Like, what was the thing that you thought, oh, this should be straightforward, and it actually really, really wasn't? And how did you make it work?
The most challenging is that context stuff. The industry, it's still, and to this day, it's still challenging. That's the bit where I feel like my brain is being twisted around and swirling around, and I'm trying to sort of figure out how I can really prove beyond any reasonable doubt that whatever you've done as a business is the thing that has resulted in the success, as opposed to any other influencing factors. That industry context is tough. I think that when I work on awards that have to do with campaigns, creative marketing campaigns of some kind, I think that it can be challenging to, because in those cases, you're usually working hand in hand with the agency and the brand. And it can be challenging to get the brand on board, or the brand might say, yes, 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 we're happy to help. And then suddenly they're presented with this very long list of kind of results versus objectives, data requirements. And they're kind of like, oh, I don't know if I can get hold of that. Or it can be difficult for them to get hold of that information. And I think equally, if you are within a business and you're writing business awards, it can be a struggle because you're going to have to be getting information from many different strands of your business. And so it can be difficult and challenging depending on how your business is set up. It can be tough to get that information in a timely way.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your tips and tricks about award writing. We actually just wanted to play a little game to round things off, which was a kind of B2B marketing truth versus myth. So I'll just ask you a question and you'll just have to, I guess kind of immediately give us your gut reaction. Do you think this is true or not? Or is it a truth or a myth? And you can also just, I guess, give a bit of a reasoning as to why. I think this is a bit of a tricky one. You will tell us, given that you're the expert. The statement is, it's only worth entering awards if you win.
Because for many reasons, because as I said earlier, sometimes it can be a cut through to just creating that great story that you can leverage in other channels. So even if you don't win, you can slice and dice the information. For example, one example could be recruitment retention. Use the information from the entry, send it to your HR people so that they can leverage it with recruitment consultants that they're working with about how great a company you are. Being shortlisted, you can shout about that from the rooftops. You can still make use of being shortlisted. I mean, of course, winning is great, but it's not, you can still use that information. If it's a case study type entry, you can create case studies that you use for business development with your sales team, etc. You can slice and dice it for your marketing team. There are infinite ways of using that content, and in some ways, the award is just an end to a means as opposed to the end itself.
Interesting. Okay. That's a bit of a surprising answer to me, but I really like your reasoning. So thank you so much for playing along. And thank you for being with us today. That's it from us for this episode of the Isoline podcast. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.